really is nothing like a good night's sleep, and how our sleeping environment is set up can go a long way in determining how restful those nights can be.
Yes, Haylee Hauser is joining us from Red Door Pediatric Therapy to talk to us about setting up the proper sleep environment and how important sleep is to our overall health. So we welcome you, Haylee, and let's start by talking about what impact sleep has for our health and with our children as well.
Yeah, so sleep can look like we're really just tired physically or mentally. If we don't get enough sleep, we can just definitely tell that our processing is slower. We're not able to regulate our emotions as easily. The parent's stress can be really high because if the child isn't sleeping, most likely the parent isn't sleeping as well. So it really can impact that relationship. Also, just decreased functional performance on daily tasks can also be impacted if we're not getting the proper sleep.
Yeah, and whether it's adults or children, you're dealing with a child, and I'm sure you can tell when Lucy hasn't had the proper amount of sleep, and I know how I feel when I haven't had the proper amount of sleep. For a child, and maybe it varies, depending on the age, but for a child, what kind of hours should they have as far as a sleep per night?
So it depends on the age. Typically 10 to 12 hours for those younger kiddos, and can move to the 8 hours. We don't want to get less than that.
Yeah, and we want to encourage
When they're
them.
young.
Oh, I'm sorry. We want to encourage those children to get the proper amount of sleep as best as we can. We see some impacts to our day, probably our day-to-day life when they're not. Can you talk about what some of those issues that would be?
Yeah, so you see definitely an increase in behavior. Physically, they're going to look tired. They're not going to be able to process information as well. They might be falling asleep just at the table if they're sitting in school. And so that's a huge factor. We want them to be able to process and help them with their school as well as just their daily functional tasks.
Okay, if you're going to set up the optimum area for a child to get the optimum amount of sleep, what would you say that bedroom or that sleeping situation should look like?
Yeah, so with the longer days now, the sun's out longer, and so that's really hard for kiddos just to recognize that, hey, it's still light out, but it is my bedtime. So those room darkening blinds are really helpful for that. Also, it's important to limit that screen time 1 to 2 hours before bed. That screen also keeps us awake. It's light. So doing more of a quiet activity like a puzzle or reading a book or maybe having some kind of story time before bed. We also can use fun nightlights. Some kiddos are afraid of the dark, and so a fun nightlight would really help them just to remain calm and decrease their anxiety with sleeping on their own and in their own bedroom. Um, some other things to think about are washing the sheets regularly, and considering the age of the mattress and how, if the mattress is firm or soft, what the kiddo prefers. Also, the materials of the sheets. Some kids really like soft sheets, other kids like those compression sheets, to keep them organized and calm.
That's an interesting point there. You can kind of play around with what different options of sheets kind of works the best, and maybe it'll take a little time to really find the right fit. Another tip that you have that I really like and have found it so helpful at home. My husband is kind of in charge of bedtime for our daughter, but he has every night he's got to put away all the clothes, all the books go back on the shelves, and he makes sure that the room is clean and not cluttered. Is that something that you recommend to families too?
Yes, absolutely. Keeping that room clean and clutter free. It just helps kids not to get distracted. And when there's a toy out, kids are going to want to play with the toy. But when it's bedtime, it's bedtime. And so reducing that clutter definitely helps. Yes.
Great.
Now, I know for me, I have a fan that's running all the time. We were talking during commercial break, different ways that you can use from sounds, relaxing sounds, things like that. For me, a fan is very calming in not only the air movement within the bedroom, but also just that subtle noise. How important is that for a child?
Yeah, so if you think about it, in the womb, we hear a lot of different noises. There's the heartbeat and the blood flowing and all that. And kids find that very calming. So those noise machines are very calming. Also, it blocks out any noises outside of the bedroom that may happen, whether it be another sibling in the room next to them crying. So it just helps them get that consistent sleep and that calming.
Yeah. Okay, so there are some families that may have a situation where they've got two children sleeping together in the same room, or you have maybe co-sleeping or something. So you have to think about how all of these preferences are going to work into the certain sleep situation that you have. Do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, it's really just trial and error sometimes, you know. It's one kid might really like the noise machine and the other kid might not. So maybe one kid needs to wear some earplugs, or you just got to really evaluate how the kid performs with each other too. And maybe it would be best to split them up in the future.
You know, Haylee, I'm not a good sleeper when it's too warm in the room. I like it on the cooler side. Is that something you'd recommend for children as well, or is that kind of an individual thing? Some people like it a little warmer than others. Do you try and it's kind of trial and error to see perfect temperature for their situation?
Yeah, absolutely. It really just depends on the child, but what's important too is, you know, sometimes the temperature changes at night, but having spare blankets within the room, or a fan in the room, or some water next to the bedside so that they have the ability to independently regulate their body without going and helping or asking for help. So that's important to keep those blankets, water, and fan in the room just to regulate that temperature.
So many great ideas, Haylee, and I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention, because it's something parents especially will put so much effort into trying to figure out how to make bedtime easier and more effective. So this is great. If we have more questions for Red Door Pediatric Therapy, where can we find you guys?
Yeah, you can find us in our Bismarck, Minot, or Grand Forks location. Our main office is in Bismarck, and you can call us at 701-222-3175.
Okay, Haylee Hauser from Red Door Pediatric Therapy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
All right,
you too.
thank you. Stay with us, North Dakota Today. We'll continue right after this.